Alright, in this video we are going to consider the objective morality doctrine sketched by Danny Duchamp in 2 videos earlier this year. His videos are basically response videos to the Amazing Atheist, also known as TJ, who holds that morality is ultimately subjective, and his video was itself a response to a comic by Red Panels. I like Danny Duchamp. I like his videos. I think he's thoughtful. He actually makes quite a fine attempt here to establish objective morality. What we are going to do is basically ask him, and the type of which he is a fine example, why do you even ask the question of objective morality? So let's begin by introducing you to our interlocutors. First, it will be Danny in his shitty Honda Fit, and then TJ's voice reading Red Panel's comic about him.
I'm back!
Hello, I'm the Amazing Atheist, and welcome back to another video. As some of you know, I believe morality is ultimately subjective, but before we get into that, let's watch some videos and criticize other people's subjective assessments of morality.
That's pretty damn good. I mean, it nails TJ on his subjectivist approach to morality, and in only 3 panels.
Now, I should point out that if you watch TJ's original video, it is clear that he is reading Red Panel's comic ironically. We'll comment on this contradiction more at the end. But I'm going to ask a question before I play any more clips, because the subject itself that is being discussed requires a comment. Why are we discussing whether or not morality is objective? Well, the direct answer is because Red Panels suggested an objective morality doctrine in a short writing accompanying his comic. But it's actually a popular topic to discuss, and I don't think that its popularity is deserved. Supposedly, the point is that if people believe that morality can be objective, then they can be satisfied that they make the right choices in life. But I think we will see what is really going on. This is a symptom of the triumph of physical science, of us living in modernity where its particular virtue is its physical science, and wanting to apply the same standards to everything, including morality. We'll see this impulse permeate the discussion. Alright, we should let Danny analyze the comic, since it is his argument that we will be trying to follow.
TJ really does argue against objective morality, and for subjective morality. This panel also mentions the phrase, ultimately subjective, which is important because TJ argues not just that we can have subjective opinions about what morality ultimately is, but that there really is no objective ultimate fact of the matter when it comes to morality. And TJ really does then go on to criticize other people's morality. The comic even phrases it, other people's subjective assessments of morality, which is a phrase that accepts the subjectivity that exists with morality, but points out that this subjectivity is merely our individual attempt at understanding what is actually moral. Thus, objective morality must exist.
Actually, Danny, even if nothing was actually moral, people would still have subjective assessments of morality. So, you have begged the question of whether or not there is objective morality.
Just like how I might have a subjective assessment about what's in this box, I might also have a subjective assessment about whether something is moral. In order for me to be right or wrong about what's in the box, there must be an objective fact about what's really in the box that either matches my assessment or doesn't. In order for me to be right or wrong about whether something is moral, there needs to be an objective fact about what is moral that either matches my assessment or doesn't. That's what being wrong is. When the model of reality in one's head doesn't match reality. If you don't believe there is an objective fact of the matter, what the hell does telling me I'm wrong about something even mean? So that's why I think it nailed you, TJ.
You're comparing apples and ideas here, Danny. You are trying to invoke standards for physical science and apply them to morality. TJ would say that physical things are the only things that exist. He would say that there is no box of morality. This is what is known as the fact-value split. Leo Strauss says about it that facts and values are absolutely heterogeneous, as is shown directly by the absolute heterogeneity of questions of fact and questions of value. No conclusion can be drawn from any fact as to its valuable character, nor can we infer the factual character of something from its being valuable or desirable. Now, Strauss didn't accept the fact-value split. In fact, he was a notable critic of it. Moral judgments are a subset of value judgments generally, and the fact-value split is what needs to be overcome if we are going to come up with some sort of natural basis for morality. We don't just need a box of morality, we need a box of value judgments. The reason we can't apply to morality the same standards that we use for physical science is what Strauss says. Questions of fact and value are absolutely heterogeneous. They are completely different. I'll explain it in this way. I take objective to mean that something looks the same from every point of view. And something else that I take to be objective is that most people are full of shit, so I'm not really a consensus type of guy. What is objective applies to physical science because of science's emphasis on replicability. We can do the whole, oh, science isn't consensus routine, and it has some merit, but let's be real. The aspect of science that experiments should be replicable points toward valuing consensus or agreement. And so, the problem with applying that standard to morality should be clear. What about morality is replicable? Morality is prescriptive, not descriptive. It tells us what ought to be done and not what is, so it seems as though there isn't anything to replicate. When I come up with an explanation about gravity, I am necessarily making predictions about gravity, the future accuracy of which goes a long way toward vindicating my explanation. When I make a moral statement about what the right or wrong thing to do is, I am not making any predictions except maybe incidentally. For instance, if I say that someone will be unjust for drinking and driving, I have just attached a prediction to the statement, drinking and driving is wrong, which doesn't make a prediction at all. The idea that drinking and driving is wrong isn't replicable. The idea of understanding who will drink or drive in order to predict when it will happen or what the consequences of it are is a subject of some sort of social science. The idea of whether or not drinking and driving is wrong is a subject of morality. So the question of objective morality seems like category mistake. The proper question to ask is whether or not someone can do the right thing, has ever done the right thing, or whether there is natural right. Anyway, we'll let Danny describe his box of morality a little bit.
So where are we? We exist. We have values. And we recognize that other people also have values, and we ascribe a kind of secondary value to them from our own perspective. Therefore, what we are trying to do, by the very definition that emerged for values just based on our observations, is to figure out how to fulfill those values. Well, how can we get that to happen? Well, we just all fulfill our own, right? We agreed before we can fulfill our own better because we understand them better. Well, sure, but there's a problem there, because sometimes our values conflict. So, when we take an action that restricts someone else's ability to fulfill their values, we're being counterproductive to the goal. We need a word to describe those actions that are counterproductive in that way. How about immoral? And on the other hand, some actions will actually help others to fulfill their values, and we need a word for that too, I think. How about moral? Notice that we now have a goal, by the way. The goal that we're trying to reach. And as soon as you have a goal, subjectivity goes out the window.
You're quite onto something here, although it needs to be cleaned up a bit. First of all, I am inclined to think ideas like this beg the question of why people value what they value. Certainly, a given generation more or less attempts to deliberately indoctrinate the next generation with its values, and so it seems to me as though the question, what should people value, has to be answered before we conclude that people should be allowed to pursue what they value, or it is only right if people are allowed to pursue their own values if they are more or less a fine group of people. You sort of assume a certain level of civilized society, and certainly morality is more general than civilized society. Anyway, you are quite right to turn your explanation toward the existence of goals. Morality does seem to be a sort of goal. The question has to be taken up first with regard to apparently trivial issues. Do value judgments in general seem to imply goals? For instance, a pair of scissors is supposed to be used to cut paper. If it can't be used to cut paper, then it can't accomplish its goal. Is it just an opinion that one pair of scissors is better than another's? So, inanimate objects have goals too. You can think about it endlessly. Chairs, cameras, cars, this piano behind me. Actually, let's consider the piano since it will provide us with a special case of value judgment. Let's say that I play a scale more or less well. Then, let's say that I play a scale but make the notorious mistake of playing too loudly with my thumb every time I use it. Am I correct when I say that the first scale was better than the second? I would suggest that someone that says that it is merely opinion isn't really being frank and is just trying to win an argument. But it is quite possible that most people would never notice someone playing too loudly with their thumb. Therefore, we have to consider that the expert is the appropriate judge. When we make the expert the judge, what we have done is contrary to objectivity, since we are saying that there are certain people with a privileged point of view. Similarly, we have to consider the issue of education. I have taught thousands of piano lessons. I play better than my students, but is that a fact or just like my opinion, man? It doesn't suffice to say that I play in a more physical or complex way because we have to answer the question of why complexity is desirable. The reason my playing better than my students is a fact becomes clear once we consider what music is. Music is a thing that has features, especially tone, rhythm, dynamics, and timbre. To say that playing music well is just like someone's opinion man is to say that music only has these features as a matter of just like someone's opinion man as well. A side point, I am not asserting that no value judgments are just like someone's opinion man. For example, picking between Beethoven, Mozart, and Haydn isn't like picking between me and my students. Another one that might hit closer to home, Danny, is your Honda Fit actually shitty? Or is that just like someone's opinion, man? Aristotle has a line about all this that we should consider. He begins the Nicomachean Ethics saying that every action seems to aim at some good. The good, therefore, has been well defined as that at which all things aim. This is known as the teleological view, referring to the Greek word teleos, which means end or goal. It is related to the question Aristotle raises in the Metaphysics of what is a house? Is a house merely the material of which it is made? Or is a house also a structure that people live in to keep their belongings and protect themselves from the elements? And of course, the essential question is whether we can apply this teleology to humanity. What is humanity's goal? We have to ask what humanity's features are, what humanity is. Well, I'm going to begin once again by quoting Aristotle that people are the political animal because they live together by speaking about how to live well. This idea of living well is a point of contention. Enlightenment-era philosophy introduced merely living as the goal of humanity, but I consider this to be more of an ideological rationalization rather than a description of reality. People have merely living as an immediate goal in their life, but clearly that is not the ultimate goal people have in mind. People want to live so that they can live well. It is simply a travesty of the facts to say that people's ultimate goal in life is merely living. Aside from that, there is the fact that people can't actually learn how to speak without making value judgments. Speech necessarily requires that we consider some things as better than others, and people go through their lives making decisions among alternatives about what they prefer. And so we can say that people live so as to live well. But let's get a little more specific than that. If we assert that how to live well can only be just like someone's opinion man, we have to extend that claim to psychological health. I will follow the classics here and briefly sum up their view of psychological health, saying that the healthy man is the man that is ruled by reason instead of by passion. For the classics, the standard for moral action wasn't whether or not it prevented action by someone else, but rather what kind of person is likely to perform a given action. If a given action would likely require that someone is an a-hole to carry it out, then that action is ignoble, or, as we might say, immoral. Anyway, there's a few more points that I want to complain about, so we'll cover those and we'll wrap this up.
I would make the safest assumptions possible about morality. For example, at least some of the things that people value are actually worth valuing. This isn't to say always, but saying nothing we value is worth valuing puts us in the ethical dark. So we must make an assumption there. Now, from that, I can say a few things. For example, that morality must act on the level of the individual, not the collective. We experience things and value things as individuals. Many people in a collective can value the same things, but it's still the individuals in the collective doing the valuing.
I think it is more accurate to say that action acts on the level of the individual. Morality is much more tied to the situation, or with a particular action. For example, I left out a back and forth you had with TJ earlier in your video.
Is it right or wrong to spank children?
In just about every case that's wrong, but your question doesn't give us enough information to be totally sure.
Is it right or wrong to get an abortion?
Definitely not enough information there.
Is it right or wrong to allow euthanasia?
Allow? Well, there are some cases in which it's justified, so we shouldn't prohibit it entirely. I mean, if that's what you mean. If that's not what you mean, then insufficient information again.
Is it right or wrong to kill a murderer?
That one's pretty much just wrong. Unless he's about to kill again, I suppose, but other than that, it's just information, dude.
You see, we can't even discuss what the right thing to do is without discussing a particular situation. And so what is right belongs to the situation, or what we call situational ethics, or LOL, situational morality. I'm going to save roasting that silly distinction between ethics and morality for another video. Finally, I should have a quick comment about TJ's hypocrisy that is being noted in Red Panel's comic, and which is essentially the basis of your critique of him. TJ noted this, for instance, in the end of his video.
If you want some objectively valid reason why we need to do that, I can't give you one. I don't think there's an objectively valid reason why this species even deserves to exist. Yet I'm glad we do so, and I hope we continue to do so.
This is what Leo Strauss calls noble nihilism, and Alan Bloom calls nihilism American style, or nihilism without the abyss. Of course, relativism might be a better word, but they're similar enough for our purposes. See, nihilism came to America along with rock and roll and hippies and LSD, and so there is a notorious indifference to the abyss, and the abyss is their belief that there is nothing right to do. These nihilists don't have to face the consequences of their nihilism because, well, I mean, come on. But you can't really have a society of people with completely rational beliefs anyway, so it isn't shocking that a bunch of people would behave this way. These people take from their nihilism a comfort that they feel the right way about stuff, and they concoct a doctrine something along the lines of that Any action is fine so long as it doesn't prevent someone else from pursuing their goals, not unlike your doctrine. Of course, you made your video because you are aware of the abyss, what you call the ethical dark. Of course, as I have explained, the alternative to nihilism or subjective morality isn't objective morality, but rather it is the situational ethics and teleology of the likes of Plato and Aristotle. So, TJ mistakenly rejects objective morality for two reasons. First, he dwells on the many proximate goals of humanity and misses the single ultimate goal, which is living well or psychological health. We need to hear from him that psychological health is just like someone's opinion, man. That goes for physical health too. Is it just like someone's opinion, man, that having a broken bone isn't desirable? And second, he should reject objective morality on the basis of category mistake. He rejects it for the wrong reasons. The question of objective morality is only asked because people mistakenly apply the standards of physical science, which are based on replicability, to morality, which doesn't really have a replicable aspect. So Danny, I might like to hear from you why you think people should even be asking the question of objective morality. The proper question to ask is whether or not someone can do the right thing, has ever done the right thing before, or whether there is natural right.
I'm the Amazing Atheist. Objective morality is bullshit. Peace the fuck out.
The Amazing Atheist. Unblock me on Twitter, you cock. Get out of my shitty Honda Fit.